Welcome, everybody, to Dr. Becky's Clinic, and this is DW. We're so excited that you're part of what's going on. And you talk about being in the right place at the right time. That is an understatement. And just by way of introduction, not that she needs a phenomenal introduction, because when you hear her talk, you're going to hear, just how phenomenal in some of the results that Dr. Becky has received in the past. But she's done some things that's kind of noteworthy, and being a doctor who's board certified, and then being a specialist as a gastroenterologist, that's a big deal. And Dr. Becky had a thriving practice that was lasted for 13 years, and then she was able to retire from that practice. But prior to the practice, just in getting into becoming a doctor, she started her educational career out in Philadelphia, and then moved on into Arizona, and was one of the first women that Arizona ever accepted. Not that there weren't applications, but one of the first that they accepted into gastroenterology. And so that is, internal medicine and knowing what's going on in the movement of everything is just absolutely huge. And so she was, 10 years ago, she was able to retire. And it's because she found a lot of answers that she was searching for, with nutrition, and becoming someone who is, very adverse with medicinal therapeutic nutraceuticals, was able to, be very successful in the networking industry, plus reach thousands of people and see thousands of lives change, and people start getting healthier and getting rid of some of the toxic narcotics and drugs that so often is just a quick fix. Dr. Becky, we're just so glad that you are one of the few that literally stood on the stage and probably took the tomatoes and took some of the fruit and stuff they were throwing at you, because you were like, the cutting edge of doctors that back then it wasn't popular to step out. It wasn't popular to make a stance. And we just want to celebrate you tonight and say thank you for that. And thank you for stepping out, and double thanks from your entire audience this evening for being a part of this call. So welcome to Dr. Becky's Clinic, everybody. Dr. Becky, welcome.
Thank you so much. Now, can you hear me okay? Because I have a little bit of feedback on my phone.
I can hear just a tad bit of feedback, and but at the same time, you're coming across loud and clear. And so I'm going to jump into real quick if you're ready. The topic tonight's Fucoydon, and when you're talking about Fucoydon, I'm still trying to figure out how we can do this in just one call. So there might be some backup and follow-up calls in the future. We'll see what happens there. But Dr. Becky, we're talking about the wonders of Fucoydon, and I call it the difference maker in people's lives. And before we get into that, I just kind of I can't help but ask this question just a little bit. Would you just share with your audience some of the disease states and some of the situations that you witnessed? If you would have had Fucoydon then, would have made an impact with your existing patients?
And with these calls, everyone, I'm going to incorporate a lot of what I saw in clinical practice, because when I was in clinical practice, my patients were very, very sick, and I only had traditional means in the beginning to, give them, and it really wasn't helping them. So I want to really show everyone what I witnessed, and then what we can do with the products at hand, what Sisel has, and what we can do to empower people to get their quality of life back. And being a gastrointestinal specialist, obviously taking care of the GI tract, I saw a lot of inflammatory conditions. I saw a lot of, the reflux esophagitis, and I saw a lot of irritable bowel. But one thing that was really epidemic in my practice, and it grew year after year, was something called inflammatory bowel disease. And some of you may have heard of Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. And it was really remarkable over the 13 years I practiced how many more people started showing up at younger and younger ages with these disorders. And Crohn's disease was a very severe systemic disease of the intestinal tract. It could affect the mouth, the esophagus, the stomach, small intestine, the colon, the anal canal. But like ulcerative colitis in terms of its systemic effects, it could affect the liver, the kidney in terms of kidney stones, could affect the eyesight, the musculoskeletal system, the skin. And with ulcerative colitis, it mainly affected the colon, but also could systemically affect other areas of the body outside of the colon. And when I look back at how we were taught in traditional medicine to manage these two major disease states, it was this stepwise progression of drugs. I'll never forget this because I learned it in medical school, and it was taught again during my internship and residency and my GI fellowship and into my private practice, where you start with one layer of drugs, anti-inflammatories. And some of you may have heard of Azicol and Pentasa and sulfasalazine, and that was to try to combat the inflammation of the intestinal tract or somewhere else in the body. But if that didn't work, then you progressed to steroids. And steroids were horrible. I mean, short term, they're bad enough. I just had a friend that came off steroids. He was pretty much psychotic for the 6 weeks he was on them. That's normal. It just gives you so many bad side effects. But chronically, steroids are terrible. And I actually had a lady in my practice that had Crohn's disease, but she came to see me 6 years after she was diagnosed, and she was taken care of by another GI doctor in Phoenix. He was not in Tucson. But he had kept her on steroids, high doses for 6 years, and because it totally destroyed her immune system, and she got an infection in her legs, by the time she came to me, she had had both of her legs amputated to the hip, and she had a colostomy bag. And this beautiful woman with kids comes in a wheelchair to my office because she didn't know what else to do because she was still on the steroids because this doctor would not pull her off. So it took me 3 years to get her off steroids and help her. And I did help her a lot with nutrition, and she's still alive today. So that was the second line of defense against ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. And then you move to chemotherapeutic agents. Then you move to more severe immunosuppressive agents. And it's really sad to just see that you're just throwing all these drugs at people. And I couldn't figure out if the disease was worse or the drugs were worse. And what I want you to recognize with what I'm going to share with you next and how it's going to fit in with Fucoydon is there's a tie-in with everything that I say tonight, because I want to keep this as simple as possible because we can get really technical with Fucoydon because there's 1,000 studies out there. And I haven't read them all. I've been reading all weekend, and I'm learning a lot, but I just want to kind of bring the salient points out so that you leave with some pearls of knowledge that allow you to go out there and help people with this amazing product. The reason a lot of people ended up with severe inflammatory conditions of their bowel and also of their liver, because I did a lot of hepatology in my practice. So I saw steatohepatitis, which is fatty liver, alcohol-induced hepatitis and cirrhosis, toxicity of the liver from drugs, and also hepatitis B and hepatitis C. Well, when you look at our gut and our immune system, 80% of our immune system sits in our gut. People don't realize that. The lining of our gut is connected to our immune system. So we have something called Peyer's patches that sit throughout the gut, and they're related to bringing T cells and B cells, these lymphocytes, these immune cells to combat viruses and heavy bacteria and harmful toxins within our system, within our gut. But there's also good bacteria and bad bacteria in our system, and we need to maintain the good bacteria, the lining of our intestinal tracts intact. So if we have a good immune system and we have a really strong positive bacterial system within our gut, we can prevent a lot of diseases because so many diseases are related to our digestive system. It just makes sense. That old adage of you are what you eat, absolutely. What you drink, what you eat, what you bring into your system has a direct response on how your body is going to perform throughout the years. And if you look at pretty much any disease state, you can link it back to the gut. Well, when I look at what was happening with my patient base, a lot of people had overgrowth of the bad bacteria because their immune system was starting to fail, because of the toxicity, because of the nutritional depletion. When those two things happen, something called leaky gut syndrome can occur. And when you think about that, that's just things leaking into your system, leaking in bacteria, maybe viruses, toxins. And when that occurs, you're set up for a whole host of diseases. When I look at the literature and I look at the study on even leaky gut syndrome, this has been tied to autoimmune diseases, arthritic conditions, skin conditions like eczema, diabetes, thyroiditis, which is inflammation of the thyroid, Graves' disease, multiple sclerosis, lupus. I mean, it's Addison's disease. That's just to name a few. So I want you to kind of keep it in the back of your mind that when your immune system starts to break down, and then the bad bacteria takes over in the gut, you're a setup for a lot of disease and illness. So DW, I'm going to turn it back to you, and we're going to get more into the deep part of Fucoydon and what it does to address these issues.
Well, it's just fascinating what you're talking about because, it's, and Dr. Becky just being raised a farm boy, if the eliminator is not eliminating, you're in trouble. And a lot of people don't realize how much trouble they're in. And Fucoydon's helped so much because it does inflammation, it helps with circulation, and then you just brought up some healing properties that it can do. And so that kind of getting my attention big time. But, we refer to it a lot. I mean, we're not the science guys. It's, it's Tom Sr. and Tom Jr. and yourself. You understand the science and the practical applications on how it can help. So a lot of us have even referred to as Fucoydon as, man, this was liquid gold, because the stuff is so powerful. We get such phenomenal results. But, just if you take a few minutes and break it down to us exactly, and tell us exactly, what is Fucoydon? How can we share that with others?
Absolutely. Fucoydon is a nutrient that occurs actually in the cell walls of brown seaweed, mainly brown seaweed. You can find certain sea forms of life like sea cucumbers and sea snails and even urchins that have a little bit of the Fucoydon. But basically, if you think about the slimy layer of brown seaweed, and in Tonga it's called limumui, and then in Japan the main brown seaweed there is mazuku. I'm not sure if I'm saying everything appropriately, but those are the two main brown seaweeds. And the Fucoydon is actually a complex sulfate polysaccharide. That's a lot of words. Basically, it's just a string of simple sugars put together. It's a polysaccharide. But let me break it down a little bit further. The slimy part of the seaweed is the water-soluble dietary fiber. Okay, think about that. And a light bulb should be going off in your head. Fiber. What does fiber do for our digestive system? What does a polysaccharide do? Polysaccharides are easily, and fiber is balancing to our intestinal tract. So if you think about what I just mentioned in terms of leaky gut syndrome, an immune system that's suffering, bad bacteria overgrowth, leaky gut syndrome, you're bringing in this all-natural food, this magical seaweed from the ocean, and what it's going to do, because it's a water-soluble dietary fiber, is it's going to allow for the repopulation of the good bacteria in your gut, and it's going to stimulate your body's natural immunity at the level of the gut. It's going to reverse what was happening before. So now you have strength in good bacteria. You have strength in your immune system. So I'm going to kind of pull all this together so you understand a little bit of the pathophysiology and the science and the biochemistry behind it. But to me, it makes total sense. And the other thing that's really interesting, because last week I talked about eternity, and we talked about resveratrol. And resveratrol was a nutrient that you find in the grape, in the stems, in the vine, in the grape itself, in the skin. And resveratrol is produced protectant for that plant and for that fruit, because the fruit, if it's exposed to fungus or UV light or injury or stress, the resveratrol is produced to protect it. Well, guess what the Fucoydon does for seaweed? If seaweed is injured, if it's under stress, if all of a sudden it's outside of the ocean and it's exposed to the air and it's not ready for it, the Fucoydon is being produced at high amounts to protect the seaweed. So if you extrapolate how resveratrol is protecting the plant but protecting humankind, that's exactly representing. It's protecting this beautiful plant that's so rich in nutrients in the ocean, but it has so many protecting capabilities to help mankind. So that's why the studies are so impressive, and we're going to definitely get into that. And I think that what we need to recognize is that we have something here with Sisel that's very concentrated. It's a very super concentrated, super saturated liquid. So it is increased in terms of absorption. So its cellular bioavailability is very, very strong. And I'll share with you how they extract it. When you pull the Fucoydon, well, what you do is you take the seaweed itself, the brown seaweed, and you dry it. And you naturally dry it. You don't do it with harsh chemicals. You don't dry it with artificial light. You let it naturally dry with real light. It takes a while. Once it dries, then all of the nutrients are intact. Then you re-soak it so that the sliminess comes back out. It comes out more like tenfold. And now you have the nutrients all within that Fucoydon, and then you have the gel, and you can put it into a crystal, a powder, a liquid. So I thought that was pretty interesting how they do like the harvesting of the Fucoydon, but it is the active ingredient of the seaweed. And so, DW, I'm going to turn it over to you because we're going to get a little bit deeper into some of the research studies with all of this.
Well, and that does take us to the research side because, it's like, where do you start? I mean, there's so much research on it, and, and it's just amazing what we can get our hands on, and we love when Tom talks about it, when Tom Jr. talks about it, and now we're just soaking it up, you bringing it to us from a medical standpoint, and that's huge. But, talk about that. There's so much extensive that research. What do you listen to, or what's behind the research, and why so much research with the Fucoydon?
Well, there's over 1,000 scientific studies right now that supports the extensive therapeutic properties of Fucoydon, and you can actually find them at the U.S. National Library of Medicine. But let me recommend to everyone in the audience a book that I am reading that I recommend for everyone. And I'm fairly sure you can order it off Amazon. You can find it online. I'm going to post it tomorrow on Facebook and make sure it's on my blog. So if you don't have a pen, don't worry about it. But if you do, it's a book called Amazing Power of Fucoydon. And it's F as in Frank, U, C-O-I-D-A-N. And it's by a doctor in Japan. It's a Dr. Daisuke Takikawa. And so don't worry about the spelling. Just look up the amazing power of Fucoydon. And this doctor goes through so much research and a lot of anecdotal reports of people that had cancer. Now, what I'm going to talk to all of you about is the research behind Fucoydon. Don't leave this call saying, Dr. Becky says Fucoydon cures cancer and cures autoimmune disease and cures inflammation and diabetes. And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the research is going to support what I'm talking about. And there's 1,000 studies out there that you can review. And one of the big things that I did find in this particular book and a lot of the research that I read is in the mice studies that they're doing. They're, giving mice cancer, and they're having a control group that they don't give Fucoydon to, and then they have a group that they give the Fucoydon to. And what they're finding in this particular research, and it's been done again and again and again, is that the tumor burden in the mice that are given the Fucoydon is so much less, and the weight of the tumor is so much less. And something called apoptosis is happening, where the cancer cells are dying. Because remember, cancer cells don't die until the host dies. So the cancer cells are dying, and then there's this uncanny ability for the Fucoydon to stop the natural production of new vessels going to the cancer. Because when people have cancer, something called angiogenesis occurs, where new blood vessels want to get to the cancer cells to feed them. They want to feed them nutrients. They want to feed you oxygen, those cancer cells. For whatever reason, and there's more study that needs to be done here, Fucoydon is blocking the ability for the new blood vessels to feed the cancer. So the cancer cells are dying, the blood vessels are being blocked off, the new generation of them, and for some other reason it's activating something called natural killer cells. NK cells are they're like robots in our body. As soon as they see cancer or certain toxicity within our body, they just activate and they go. Well, for whatever reason, Fucoydon is activating the NK cells, the natural killer cells. So you have all of this happening to combat the cancer, but what they're also recognizing through study and research is it appears that the regeneration and the regrowth of the normal healthy cells is taking place. So the healthier cells are being nourished by the Fucoydon and regenerating and becoming healthier and healthier cells, but the cancer cells are dying off. So this is huge research. This is gigantic research. The whole of that book, The Amazing Power of Fucoydon by Dr. Takikawa, you'll read hundreds of stories of people that have, their issues with cancer and blood pressure and liver disease, where they have absolutely changed their entire quality of life for the better by using the Fucoydon. Now, to me, there's never a magic bullet. There's always a multifactorial approach to helping your health, especially when it's very significant with like a malignancy. But we have something here that by research is substantiating a lot of the positive effects. So that's one major area. Obviously, that's a huge area. The other studies obviously support that it's a very potent antioxidant. We understand the importance of all that. It boosts metabolism. It boosts immunity at the gut level. Like I said, this is a polysaccharide. It's got the dietary fiber. It's going to boost the immunity at the level of the absorptive surface of the gut. It's going to increase the good bacteria. But there's studies showing how good it is for the liver. It's potentiating good turnover of the healthy liver cells and pushing out the bad liver cells that may have been damaged. The other studies that really impressed me was about viral replication. They looked at flu virus. They looked at herpes virus, which is very, very common in the population, HIV, hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and what they're seeing in study, these are nice studies, not in human studies, it's decreasing the viral replication. And one of the other things I saw in my practice is a lot of hepatitis C. And a lot of my peers did not want to take care of hepatitis C because it was very difficult to take care of. And to give drugs, antivirals, and chemotherapeutic agents to people that were dealing with hep C, they got so sick. They were vomiting. They didn't want to go to work. They had headaches. They just didn't feel good, lost their hair. It was horrible. But I took care of a lot of those patients and worked with them mainly through nutrition to get them to a stable point with hep C. There's a lot of study coming out with Fucoydon that it's decreasing that viral replication without any of the side effects. The other thing is we're seeing that it's lowering the lipids in the bloodstream by study. Again, this is all research-based research-based data that I'm sharing with you. So lowering cholesterol, putting the good cholesterol up. HDLs are going up, LDLs are going down, triglycerides are going down. So balancing the lipids in the bloodstream and also balancing the sugar in people that are dealing with sugar issues. So when you look at the studies, you can just go through reams and reams and reams of information, but I have not seen anything negative, which is really interesting. And if you look at like Japan, Okinawa, and they have, because of their diet and the ingestion of seaweed for so long, for thousands of years, they've always had a longer lifespan than anywhere else and less disease state than anywhere else. Now, unfortunately, Western cultures are invading that area and they've had their challenges, so it's not what it used to be many years ago, but it definitely has to go back to eating the seaweed and really nourishing their body with this particular Fucoydon. So hopefully that makes some sense. I didn't want to overwhelm people, with so much, because we could do 10 calls like this and we can go deep into every avenue. But what I'd like to do now, because I always want to bring in the human touch in terms of a testimonial, and DW, I know that you've invited a very special lady who's a mom, and she's had really great results with the Fucoydon, Rachel Esch. And Rachel, I hope you're joining us on the call tonight, but I would love you to reach out and share with the audience exactly what you've experienced with the Fucoydon, without making claims. We all know that the body's a miracle. Body's toxic, nutritionally depleted, immune system's down. It's not the miracle, but we can make it miraculous by giving it the right thing. So, Rachel, I hope you're with us and love to hear your testimonial.
Yes, hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, loud and clear.
All right. Hey, I loved your information there on Fucoydon. And Fucoydon is a product that I absolutely love. It was one of the first products for myself to take for Lyme's disease. 2 years ago, I was really, really sick with Lyme's disease. I mean, I was flat in bed, couldn't take care of my children, just a very sick lady. And then somebody introduced me to Sisel, and I took the Triangle of Life, all three of them, and the Body Shield. And honestly, I can say in 2 weeks I was up and felt like a brand new person. And I really think the Fucoydon was one that I took a lot of, and I really think that helped me to, to boost my immune system, which then helped to repair my body and all that. And I just want to share another little testimony that I have on the Fucoydon. I have 2 little boys, and here a couple months ago, my oldest woke up in the morning with a fever and was saying he don't feel good. And I figured, oh no, he's coming down with a bad cold like he does every winter. So I got a 2-ounce dropper bottle and filled it with Fucoydon. And I set the timer. By the way, he loves Fucoydon. He would drink the whole bottle if I'd allow him to. And so I filled the 2-ounce dropper bottle, set the timer for 15 minutes. Every 15 minutes, I gave him a dropper full till the bottle was empty. And his fever and everything was gone. By lunch, he was running around and no more symptoms after that. But by then, my youngest son was coming down with it, and I did the same thing for him with the same results. So I was so tickled with that. Now that's my thing to go for. As soon as I see a runny nose or any problems like that, I go for Fucoydon.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I absolutely love the product. And I love your information. Thanks a lot for sharing that.
Thank you. I really appreciate the testimonial. And when you look at the studies and how we're boosting immunity, it just makes sense. When you hear testimonials like this and you look at the research and you look at the data, then it really does make complete sense to me why things are happening the way they're happening in a positive cascade. The other thing that never made sense to me in medicine, especially when we talk about diseases like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis and inflammatory conditions, where we're giving immune suppressant drugs. So we're knocking the immune system completely down where it is, and we're surprised that we see side effects. I mean, I'll share one story and then make a comment before we go to the next question. But in terms of immunosuppressants, my partner, when I was in practice with my partner early on, she had a young woman with Crohn's disease, and she gave her a drug that was a very heavy-duty immunosuppressant. And this was a drug I never prescribed. I never, ever, ever prescribed it because it scared me, and I just knew something bad was going to happen. And she gave this drug to this woman with Crohn's, and within 2 weeks, this lady was dead, and she was young. And it's because she had, nobody even guessed it, she had tuberculosis. She was exposed to TB, and it became a full-blown tuberculosis outbreak in her lungs, and she died pretty much, overnight. Couldn't save her. And it's on the label. If you're exposed to fungal areas, if you're exposed to mycobacterium like tuberculosis, let your doctor know. Well, nobody knew, and she died. And it's just because we're suppressing her immune system. It never made sense why we go in that direction. When you look at Fucoydon, you're boosting immunity, and you're boosting the ability to fight off the cancer cells the right way, in my opinion. Again, don't walk out there and say we're curing things. What we're doing is we're looking at the data, we're looking at the research, and we're making an informed decision. That's why I like this book a lot, because I can share this with people and say, you know what, I'm just here to give you information that I think is really positive, but you make an informed decision about your health, and we can change a lot of lives doing that versus, shoving chemo, radiation, and all these drugs down people's throats. So before I get too crazy on my soapbox, the other thing I wanted to share about Fucoydon, which I just found this study right before the call. When I was in practice, I saw obviously a lot of gastric ulcers. A lot of people had bleeding ulcers. They just had painful ulcers of the stomach, small intestine. And one of the number one causes of ulcer disease is a bacteria called Helicobacter pylori. Some people have heard of it as H. pylori. When it was introduced into the medical community several decades ago, the doctor introduced it as a potential cause for ulcer disease, was basically thrown off stage at a huge GI conference, told he was a quack, and he knew nothing. The bottom line is this bacteria can invade the wall of the intestinal tract, the stomach and small intestines specifically, and cause severe ulceration. Fucoydon's been studied in this realm, and what it's showing is because it's such a little slimy, slippery substance that when it gets into our system, it has the ability to heal and bind the H. pylori so that you excrete it through your stool. That's what they're assuming, through the stool. So there's still some study that has to go on there, but just another benefit of boosting immunity, binding the bad stuff, bringing in the good stuff, allowing the body to rebalance, allowing for our metabolism to come up, using the antioxidant power, addressing lipids in the blood, addressing diabetes. So much going on here. And just know our supersaturated compound is like nothing else that's out there. And you can start slow. You can do 3/4 of an ounce a day. I actually do an ounce 3 times a day. And when I'm at work, I start with an ounce in the morning, I have an ounce before lunch, and I have an ounce when I leave the office. And it's just that's what I do because I know I need that antioxidant power throughout the day. At least once a day, but if you can do it several times a day, you need that. You definitely need that to support your body. So, DW, I know you got one more question for me, my dear, and then we'll call it a night.
Well, I tell you what, you're amazing. I mean, I want to hear you talk more about the NK cells, but we'll maybe save that for another time. That really got my attention. And Rachel's testimony and just a case study testimony about what she's observing based on results is dynamic. And Dr. Becky, you just rock. You're awesome. But I'm going to ask one question. But in this one question, I'm going to sneak 2 questions in there. So that's better to ask for forgiveness to this permission. And so I'm going to throw it at you. But what other products will work synergistically with the Fucoydon that we have? And then give us some more tidbits. Because every time I talk to someone, they say, man, I want her to talk more about this. And it's on the dynamic hydrogen water system that Sisel's bringing to the world, and you have some of the inside scoop on it, plus just plain doctor knowledge on it. So that's one question, kind of like combined.
Very good. Well, there's always synergy and homeostasis with the Sisel products. That's how Tom Sr. and Jr. put these products together, because they want to have the ability for the body to have all that it needs, the maximum requirements to perform in a maximum ability to make them efficacious. The Triangle Life is there for a reason. It's the triangle of rejuvenation and nourishment and bringing the body back into that state of balance so that you have the cell-to-cell communication, that your vital organs are working optimally, your brain chemistry is on target, you've got that energy, your metabolism is working, your endocrine system is working. So when we look at you taking Fucoydon, which is one of the best products on the planet, take it with the Eternity, take it with the Supermax, because the Supermax, we're going to talk about that next week, nourishing, it's flooding the body, antioxidants and minerals and vitamins in such an absorbable form. We're going to get into that next week. Eternity, it's that ability for the body to adjust anti-aging and anti-inflammation and have the antioxidant power. And remember, it's a protectant for the grape and the vine, and we've got the Fucoydon that protects the seaweed, and we've got the Spectrumax that's protecting our body against further damage from free radicals and oxidation. So the Triangle of Life is there for a reason. And if you make a cocktail of the Triangle of Life every morning and then you do a little bit of those products throughout the day, you're supporting your body's ability to fight off incredible toxicity that we're all exposed to. What we drink, what we breathe, you're allowing your body to have a fighting chance. We have to do supplementation in today's day and age. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you eat. I don't care what you're doing in terms of, just growing your own vegetables, and maybe you wear a mask outside. I don't know, too many people that do. But when we're not able to get away from the toxicity, so we have to do something to support our body's strength. We want our biological age to be much younger than our chronological age. So the Triangle of Life is the perfect trifecta for what we have to manage that. The diatomic hydrogen water is beyond anything I've ever seen. This is not about the alkalinity of water. This is about bringing hydrogen into your system, and hydrogen is a powerful scavenger of these bad oxidative free radicals that are wreaking havoc and rusting our internal body down to the level of our cells and our DNA. It's also going to be able to pull nutrients in, and I think that's the main thing. When you drink this diatomic hydrogen water, anything you're ingesting from Sisel or any good foods that are good for you, you're going to pull into the vascular system more efficaciously. It's going to get into your cells quickly. It's going to go to the mitochondria. That's the energy portion of your cells. It's going to boost your metabolism, boost your energy, boost your brain chemistry. It's going to hydrate your cells better than ever, and also oxygenate very well, because you're creating O2. And I talked to a gentleman and his wife not too long ago that they're dealing with COPD, which is definitely a chronic issue with the pulmonary system, where they're on oxygen, difficulty walking. And I said, you know what? You need to bump up your Triangle of Life, because you're doing the minimum, bump it up, and you need to do the diatomic hydrogen water. You need to order a machine, because it's not only going to bring those nutrients in faster and make them work better, but you're going to bump the oxygen to your system, especially to your lungs. So it's all working together in concert together. This is the positive cascade, the positive domino effect for your health. Whereas when I was in traditional medicine, it was always the negative cascade of, why am I falling apart, and what's wrong this week, and I'm sick of these drugs, and I don't want another one, and if you give me another one, it's just more adverse side effects. So let's just go out there, you guys, and let's impart to people what we have. We've got the knowledge. We have the science. We have a beautiful company. We have formulators and scientists that are premier. They're also brilliant business individuals that know how to take this message globally to allow people not only with their health, but with their wealth. They're passionate. They have a mission. They have a vision. They want all of you to grasp that. So let's go out there and make some change. The world's my waiting room, and I love every minute of it, because I can empower people, and I do. And let me leave you with this, and then we'll call it a night. I had a friend from Denver call me not too long ago, and he was very depressed. And I said, what is wrong? And he said, one of my neighbors just passed. And he lives in a big condo complex in Cherry Creek. And I said, what happened? And he said he was really young. He was in his 50s. He had a massive heart attack. Now, my friend is in a different network marketing company, but they have some really good products. They actually have some really good products for cardiovascular issues. And I said, was this guy overweight? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, how well did you know him? He said, well, I talked to him almost every morning, because he'd be downstairs having a donut, coffee, reading the paper. I said, well, if you got to know him, how come you never struck up a conversation about what you do and what you potentially had to offer him? He goes, I don't know. He goes, I don't know what held me back about that. He goes, I'm never like that. I'm always putting it out there to get to know people and at least offer them something to help their health. And he goes, and I didn't do it with this guy, and I don't know why. And he goes, and I'm kicking myself because he had a massive heart attack. He goes, I don't know if I could have helped him, but all I know is that if I'd offered it to him and he said no, at least I put it out there. So I want all of you to think about that, because if you don't put it out there, how are you going to know? And if the no is the answer, then at least you tried. So think about that when you go out and you just live your life, and live this as a lifestyle. Don't live Sisel as a job or a career. It's not. It's a lifestyle. It's about loving people. It's about going out there and sharing and caring and giving and, imparting knowledge or your passion or your conviction or your belief on your results and testimonials like we had tonight with Rachel. So keep that in mind as you build your business and go out there and affect positive change, because we're all here for the same reason. So with that, it's Rap and DW. You're an excellent host. I always enjoy you, and I appreciate everyone's attention, and we'll get the recording up tomorrow. And good night, everybody.
Dr. Becky, you're amazing, and everybody just get this call out and get someone to Dr. Becky's clinic next Tuesday, same time, same place. See you then.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.